he created the term.
You are live now.
Okay. Well, good morning. My name is Dan. I've been in Unity for over 30 years. First of all, in Delray Beach in Florida. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But today we're going to be talking about transcendence. And what does that mean? And especially to begin with a guy by the name of Ralph Waldo Emerson. If anyone in the world changed the world, Emerson did.
Yes.
Emerson changed the world because he changed the way we saw who God was. And I think that what he did back in the 1830s and 1840s was amazing to this country. But I want to talk about Emerson. I gave a program here on Emerson pre-COVID several years ago here at Unity. And I think we've all grown since then. I mean, that's the purpose. But, you know, the key is when I think of an opening, I think of something stirring the air. Something that changes the way people think and act and makes them a better person. What is it that makes a person move into being a better person than who they are now or who they were? And, you know, that's what I really want to start with. I want to begin with a single sentence written nearly 2 centuries ago by a man who walked forest paths in Massachusetts, listened to the wind, and believed with every fiber of his being that God was not out there, but right here in us. And if there's anything that is the essence of unity, that's what that is. But he wrote, the highest revelation is that God is in every man. Ralph Waldo Emerson. And that's how we're going to start today's talk, is talking about him. Now, does that sound familiar? Does it sound of something you might hear in Unity Church on a Sunday morning? It does. And that is exactly what I want to talk about today. My name is Dan. Some of you I've known for a long time. I've been sitting in Unity pews and chairs, singing Unity songs and living Unity principles for about 30 years. This community has shaped me more than I can say. And years ago, I stood here and spoke about Ralph Waldo Emerson for the first time. Many of you came up afterwards and said, I never knew Emerson was so close to what we believe. Today, I want to go deeper. I want to trace a luminous thread from Emerson's study in Concord to the Fillmore's kitchen table in Kansas City, to this room right now, because when we understand where unity came from, we love it even more. And I believe Emerson is, in a very real sense, one of our spiritual grandfathers. Next, I want to talk about something called Emerson and the Transcendentalist vision. How did Emerson rise to a place in his time that he had so much influence and changing people's attitude towards who God was? How did he do that? He was born in 1803 into a family of Unitarian ministers. He followed the path, was ordained, and served a congregation in Boston. But something was stirring in him, a dissatisfaction with creeds, ritual, and a distant God of Calvinist theology. Too much doctrine, too little direct experience. So in 1832, at age 29, he resigned his pulpit. He traveled to Europe, read deeply in Eastern philosophy, absorbed the Romantic movement, and returned home with a fire in him. In 1836, he published Nature, arguing that the natural world is not scenery, but revelation. A living book written by God. He insisted that human beings are not fallen creatures begging for mercy. They are, in his words, part and parcel of God. Then came the famous Divinity School address in 1838. Emerson stood before Harvard's graduating ministers and said, essentially, "You have buried the living soul of Jesus under centuries of doctrine. The truth he taught, that God dwells within every person, is the truth you must reclaim." Harvard banned him for 30 years. Harvard banned him for 30 years. That was blasphemy.
Oh.
But Emerson kept writing. In The Oversoul, and that's a very important thing to think about, the Oversoul, he describes the universal spiritual presence that underlies all creation. Not a judging God, but a living presence, the ground of our being. Within man is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, the eternal one that exists in all things found in nature. Can you feel that? That is not the God of wrath. That is the God we know in unity. The God that lives within every person he walks through our door. Emerson taught that intuition is our direct line to divine truth. He taught that man-shaped experience. He taught that spirit is immanent, not distant. It's close by. Yeah. Around him gathered Thoreau, Margaret Fuller, Bronson Alcott, the transcendentalists, seekers who believed in the divinity within each person. They were clearing the ground for something that would come later, something called unity. All right. Now I want to talk about the birth of unity, the Philmo's roots, and the New Thought bridge. You have to open your mind to think about what that might mean. What is New Thought? We hear the term all the time, and we're not really sure what it means, but it's not the way things have always been considered. It's new. And you're thinking something new, so it's New Thought. But to get from Emerson to unity, we cross the bridge called New Thought. Phineas Quilby, a clockmaker from Maine, explored the relationship between mind and body. He developed methods of mental healing rooted in the idea that divine presence lives within us, and that thought shapes experience. We have to think about that for a moment. What does that mean? Divine thought lives within each person. Actually, every entity in nature is an expression of divine thought. When you think of what unity entails, and you think of one of the things that the Fillmores did, is they were very familiar with all this new thought stuff, but here in Missouri and in Kansas City, they were very aware of the indigenous people, Indians, who were here and who were tied to nature, and how everything was connected. If you think about Indian traditions, and you think about hundreds of years, how they grew and grew over time, even here in the Ozarks, the Indians they lived within the concept of being one with everything. And that was really an important connection. And what they did, what the Fillmores did in Unity, was take this idea that Emerson and these other people had done in New Thought, and thinking, how does this transcend what we think as to who God is and our relationship to who that is? That's a very simple part of what unity ultimately became. In 1886, the Fillmores attended New Thought classes in Kansas City. One of the things that Quimby did earlier is his ideas influenced Mary Baker Eddy, Emma Curtis Hopkins, and eventually Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. Yeah, go ahead.
Quimby was absolutely amazing.
Oh, yeah, it was.
I have read almost the entire Quimby manuscript, which is like.
Really? Yeah.
And he started as a mesmerist before it was transferred to hypnotism. But he started as a mesmerist. He was fascinated by it, and he would hypnotize this young kid, and the young kid would be able to describe places in Europe. He did lecture tours all through New England, and he would have people bring pictures, and the kid would describe them, and then they'd say, okay, now walk inside, and he would describe the cathedral or wherever it was. And then they asked him if he could do other things, and he found people that had disappeared, and then he started working with healing. Then the kid went off and joined a medicine man, and when he came back, all his prescriptions for healing were the guy's medicine. So Quimby said, well, so he started hypnotizing himself, and then he went into, he denounced hypnotism, but he actually cured Mary Baker Eddy. He healed her twice. And she first acknowledged it and then disavowed it and said that he took her writings. And his son would not release his manuscripts for like 40 years until she was dead. And then it showed that his stuff was dated before hers. But he started with hypnotism, and then he went into, and when I talked to Tom Taylor, he said that he thought how he healed was he went into a quantum field. Because he said he felt he healed the same way Jesus did. But he would go into a quantum field, and then he could convey that to the person with him. But he would have to correct the belief system that they had, or it would come back. Right. So his stuff is absolutely amazing.
That's a great contribution, and it's something we need to think about. One of the things we don't think about, that I strongly believe in, is we are a part of a lineage. Each one of us. When she mentions Quimby and these other, is that, again, it's spirit, and you're free to believe what you want to believe, but I believe a lineage isn't just your father, your grandfather, and your immediate family and bloodline. A lineage is thought. A lineage is spirit. A lineage is who you identify with, whether you know it or not. Sometimes you see a movie and say a word or hear a song and you hear something out here, or you're in a group and something's going on and something will click. Well, it's something you have always known and always been attracted to, even though you don't acknowledge or recognize it. Eventually, some of us come to the point of an aha moment, Somebody's trying to get my attention, and I need to pay attention. When you think of new thought, and what transcendental, what it does is it makes you see beyond who you think you are. That is the first step, because we think we think we are who we are as we sit here today, and that's who we are going to be. But I don't believe that. I'm now in my fourth or fifth book that I've written on Eastern philosophy and Taoism and Buddhism and all that kind of thing. And no, once you can identify with the sense that you are part of a lineage beyond your living self today and who you have always been. It's like the first time I was in Chufu, and I'll talk about in a few minutes. I had been there. The hotel where we stayed in, at one point, was a part of the Confucius Mansion. Tourists used to stay in the Confucius Mansion before they built the hotel. So what they did is they took a portion of the Confucius Mansion and turned it into this hotel. And it's amazing. First time I was there on my way to get my daughter Katie, Emily, in Uramuchi. We stopped in Chufu for the first time, and we stayed at this hotel. And the first night, wow, I have to get up. I got up and walked around 3 or 4 blocks. I've been here. I know this place. A block down the street was the Confucius School where I taught at 11 years later. Across the street was a hotel, the apartments where I lived. I had been there. And it's not a matter of, we have this sense of what is reincarnation. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a lineage as to who you are. And part of that is seeing beyond who we think we are. Okay, I'm sorry, I digress. But let me try to get back to what I'm talking about. In 1886, the Fillmores attended New Thought classes in Kansas City. Myrtle was suffering from tuberculosis. Embraced the idea that she was a child of God and that the disease had no ultimate claim over her divine nature. Her healing became the spark. In 1889, Charles left his business and began publishing Modern Thought. Within 2 years, the movement was renamed Unity. But here's what matters most. The Fillmores never claimed to invent these ideas. They openly acknowledged Emerson as a foundational influence. Charles Fillmore wrote, "All students of metaphysics should read Emerson. His writings contain the essence of all the higher thoughts now being given in the world." They named one of their sons Waldo, after Emerson. Unity's 5 principles: affirmative prayer, the indwelling Christ, all of it echoes Emerson's Oversoul. I have to think about that continuum, because that's what it is. It's a continuum of spirit that's expressed as thought, when we open ourselves up to whatever that may take us. Emerson said, God is in every person. Unity says, the Christ within is our true nature. Emerson said, intuition is our guide. Unity says, prayer aligns us with divine wisdom. That's a concept we have to really think about what that really means and how we internalize that to our actions, I think is really key. Emerson said, mind shapes experience. Unity teaches affirmative prayer and conscious thought. Conscious thought. The Fillmores took Emerson's vision and built a home for it. A prayer community, a village, what is now Unity Village, and a movement. And that movement eventually found its way here to Springfield, Missouri. You know, as far as my own personal reflection and 30 years in this current, what I've experienced, you know, I want to pause and get personal for a moment. When I first walked into a Unity church 30 years ago, I hadn't thought about Emerson. I say here I didn't know, but I hadn't thought about Emerson since college, 30 years earlier. Well, one thing or another, and it's like I had left that there, and it's like I'd forgotten. And then when I was reintroduced to Unity, I said, "Oh, I knew this. This is who I am." You know, and I didn't know New Thought that much. I had been already into China very much, into Taoism and Buddhism, and really in that direction for a long time. I've already written a couple of books that were later published in China at that point. But that connection back to Unity, after I spent this time with Taoism and Buddhism and thinking about each of thought and whatever, then it came back. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, the mic is not good.
So as you study the unity principles and study those things, and that transcendence part begins to change within you. So, you know, when I first came and they would go, "It is not I, but the Christ within that does the work." And then when we would say the prayer, you know, the power of God protects you, the presence of God watches over you. And I can't say those words anymore with any sense of truth. And so how I change it is I, the Christ within, that does the work. And then instead of the presence of God watches over you, I go, we are the presence of God. We are the power of God. And wherever we are, God is. So we change as we go along in this work.
Very good. And that ability to change. The first book I wrote was on the I Ching, which is about change. It was later published in China, and it's also the essence of part of my writing today. But it's the ability to change is what opens our doors to who we can be. One of the things that the I Ching teaches is underlying consequences. What are the things that are underlying, that are keeping you from what is your highest good? How are we stuck in that and not changing to who we're supposed to become? And that's what the I Ching, really the yin yang, getting a sense of what that means is all about. But when I started Unity in Delray Beach, I had already, I had just actually adopted my first daughter in China in 1906, 07. And, we decided over the next 3 or 4 years that we were going to build a Unity church in Shifu. We were going to do that. We didn't, but it shows you how you can move from where your vision is and what it can become. So at the time, I was with Sister City in Boynton Beach, and we were exchanging delegations one through another. And I had 2 delegations from Chufu come to Boynton Beach, and I took them to church with me in Delray Beach at Unity, and they were really overwhelmed. So they went back and they told people about unity, one thing and another. And then a couple of years later, in 1995, when I went back, two Unity ministers went with me. Nancy Norman, who was a minister there in Delray Beach, and her daughter, Kathy Norman, who was at Unity in California. They went with me. And it was, wow. We met with the Christian Church Association of Shandong Province. A lot of people. And I had already been talking about unity, because I'd already been there 6 or 8 times at that point. But this fits. I'd studied Confucius, I'd studied Taoism, I'd studied all these things. Emerson and unity will fit here. So they eventually agreed, and so I'll continue with that in the story. But one of the great things I love about unity is that no one asks me to leave my questions at the door. And I think that's a really important thing to think about if you go to what we call a Christian typical church. Because the mindset of what they want to believe is already present. So if we come in with a question, they don't really want to deal with that. And that's my own view of it. But what I heard was something astonishing. What unity says is you are already enough. You are already enough. God is already within you. You are already part of the divine. Now, you don't have, it's a matter of, again, getting back to Emerson, the art of transcendence. What does that mean? It means transcending all those physical elements who we think we are to move into a spiritual being who is what we are. And, I didn't really have a language that much for it. Doesn't really relate to hear it. And again, that's the mid-90s. I was hearing Emerson through the Fillmores, through Unity, through decades of teaching. There have been moments in this very room when something opened inside me, where the boundary between myself and everything else became thin. Emerson called that contact with the oversoul. And that's a great thing to study sometimes. If you leave here and you're not really, but if you do anything else, go to Emerson and look at what he was talking about when he was talking about the oversoul. Yeah, go ahead.
That's it. Unless I'm mistaken, it used to be that everyone that went to college studied Emerson.
Absolutely.
At some time. Isn't it interesting that such a revolutionary and mind-expanding idea didn't catch on in the religious world? It never caught on. It never caught on, and it was so desirable in the immediate lives of people that that's a mystery to me that it just wasn't. Evidently, it wasn't ready.
Right, they're not ready yet.
Oh, I see. Okay, that always struck me as very unusual, or very interesting that this great big idea took so long to finally mature.
One of the interesting things, if you follow history, I love history, and when you think about Emerson Where did he get the ideas he came up with? Well, he studied. He wrote a magazine called The Eye at the time. And what he tried to do with this was expand the consciousness of people to see beyond what they think they know. So he wrote about the I Ching, he wrote about Buddhism, he wrote about all these different things in the I Ching, and he had Henry David Thoreau at the time, who Thoreau lived on a little cabin that was land that was owned by Emerson. That's where he did his thing. But there is a thread of consciousness that if you identify with and you think about, you think, well, where did these thoughts come from that the filmers came with? Well, we have these people that I mentioned, and you take Emerson, and then before that, if you understand your history, you think about something like Tolstoy. Tolstoy was amazing. He was a linguist. When we think of Tolstoy, we think of Anna Karenina and War and Peace. He had studied linguistics for the previous 500 years, and he was shocked because all these monasteries and everything over 500 years of Europe, all they did is copy things from what they thought was the Word of God. That's what they did. Well, when he studied what they had written, he was shocked because that's not what was said at all. But it's the thread. When Gandhi was an attorney in South Africa, he developed what he called Tolstoy's farm. Gandhi did in South Africa. He had read Emerson. He had read what he said. He had read this new, what would have been considered a new thought at the time, and he went so far to create this little play. I don't know how big it was. He called Tolstoy's Farm in South Africa. And what he was trying to say was that there's a world out here bigger than who we think we are. And that's what he tried to tell people. And it's that thread that you follow. And then when he goes to India, and there's a revolution really driving the British out, Gandhi did that. And then today, when we think of Martin Luther King, and we think of other people in the late 20th century, who were they listening to? They were listening to Gandhi. They were listening to Emerson. They were listening to this thread that was never ending. And it's that lineage. We need to study that word more. And what does that mean? What is that lineage? And it's spirit, not a physical person. As much spirit that transcends who we are, that we can become a part of if we open ourselves to who we are and who we've always been. Yeah, go ahead.
So when we're talking about why it's so hard for people and for religions to accept these truths, everything gets turned upside down, because when you really understand this, there's nobody to blame. There's nobody that you can go, that's the guy that caused this. Everything comes back to you. You have to own everything in your life. You have to own your story. You have to own that you were a part of the creation of the suffering that you went through, even when you were a child. But once you can get that, then you're at this place of freedom, and you're at this joyful place. But you still tend to sometimes go, okay, this bad thing happened. Whose fault is it? The government? This is, yeah. And so it's a constant owning your experience, and I think that's why is we have a hard time doing that.
Well, this is a great beginning. This is why Emerson still matters. And this is why knowing history is so important, because the hunger he felt for something real, direct, intimate, is the hunger we still feel today. When transcendence becomes a movement, it's funny because in the East, in China, we call it Wu Wei, is what we call it. And, it's one thing to talk about transcendence, it's another to live it. It's another to live in transcendence. What does that mean? I think that's really the simple core here. To embody Wu Wei means effortless action. Spirit moving through us without strain or even thought. It's just so much a part of who we are is how we act. Not what we read or think, it's how we transcend into a physical form that defines who we are. That's transcendence. And what the Chinese, for well beyond 2,000 years, have called Wu Wei. Years ago, I learned this in a way I never expected. Through the Hongdan Foundation, which I formed over 20 years ago, Unity of Delray Beach partnered with the Shandong Christian Church Association to publish the China Daily Word. 1,000 copies a month for 2 years. Unity paid for the printing. The Church Association distributed across villages and towns throughout Shandong province, throughout the whole province. And who did it? Who did it? Hongdan. Well, who was Hongdan? I am Hongdan. That's my Chinese name, Hongdan. People kept them like treasures. Students learned English from them because it was in Chinese and English. One side would be English, the other side Chinese. So some later my students at university would tell me that's how they learned English. That's how they wanted to become a teacher. They saw English on this wooden word next to the Unity Daily Word. Wow, that was a trip. Students learned English from them, families read them for comfort, villages passed them from home to home. If you checked one out and you didn't bring it back, they'd come get it. That was how much they wanted it as a part of who they were. It didn't try to, the big difference with the Christian church. Because if you have Buddhism and Taoism and all these other beliefs that are prevalent, the whole idea of Christianity, what later became the family church in Shufu, is you can be as Christian as you want. You can be baptized as a Christian if you want to. But don't tell me I have to be baptized. Don't tell me I have to give up 3,000 years of history to believe that.
So is this daily word like the daily word?
It is exactly the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, I used to, when I go to China, I'd stop in Delray, Unity Village first, and I was working with the publishers there. And every month we were corresponding with, sending it to, I had a teacher in Chufu, high school teacher, that would do the translation. She would translate it a couple of months in advance to us publishing it, the English to Chinese in Chufu. And then we would publish the daily. The thing we did different in China with the Daily Word is we added a children's page to the Daily Word in China. I should bring a copy of that.
Like we with?
It is. That was the model we used. And it was in every issue we printed in the Daily Word in China. Years later, when I returned to Chufu as a teacher at the Confucius Normal School at Jingning University, people already knew who I was. This would have been in 2011. I started going to Chufu in 1999, but then we formed a sister city program. And for the first 3 or 4 years, I would go to China 3 or 4 times a year, and I would be on TV with the mayor and government officials and everybody else as this delegate from the sister city program. And Chufu is a small town. So Hongdan, they knew who Hongdan was. They knew who Hongdan was because of the daily word. And now when I began teaching, that was something. And it was years later, they knew it, not because I told them, not because I explained myself, because Spirit had already moved through something I helped to bring into their lives. I don't say that as ego. I just say it as it was. Because in China it's a little different because everybody feels like there's a glass ceiling. You can't go above this glass ceiling because you just can't. But what Unity did and what I did is show there is another way. It's a very important thing to think about. Actually, that's the title of one of my books I'm writing. There is another way. It's a very important thing to think about. But, and I realized something very important. When you no longer have to explain yourself to others, they know. They know. And in Unity, that's what we do. Through our actions, if they know you're from Unity, out here in the community doing somewhere, oh, they know. If they have any sense of what Unity is, and it opens their eyes to seeing another way. It's what we do. We help people to see another way that maybe helps to explain this transcendence of who we are. We're always in the process of becoming something else that is better than who we are now. And, this is transcendence. That is the way. That is spirit. That is unity to live, not spoken. I was teaching future teachers in Chufu, hundreds of them. And I understood that transcendence is not a concept. It is a way of being. It is a living history in action. And that's really what a lineage teaches you. Living history. If you are part of something much bigger than who you think you are, you become expansive. You live, and the more we learn about quantum physics and quantum science and that whole realm of understanding, we realize that that's the way it's always been. We only put these layers of things of what we think we know that isn't true at all. It's not wisdom that we're here to learn, And in closing, I want to talk about what I call a living tradition. I want to bring this full circle. In 1838, Emerson stood before young ministers and said, "You have been taught about religion when you should have been taught about God." Wow. That was a trip. You can see why he didn't go back to Harvard for 30 years.
Wouldn't let him in.
They wouldn't let him in. 50 years later, the Fillmores sat at a kitchen table in Kansas City and asked, what if prayer is not begging a distant God, but aligning with the divine presence within us? Unity was born from that question. I want to give a very brief, a little bit more about China and Chufu. One of the things that when I first started going in Sister City in 2002, 2003, I was a travel agent who I became very good friends with. He had a young daughter that was about 11 or 12. and I gave her an English name called Sally. Well, years later, when she was about, I guess she was 18, 19, but the people in Unity, not Unity, people in the Christian church in Chufu, we decided that she should come to Unity to go to school. We went so far as that Unity Village would send me the first few months of what a minister would have to learn coming to, and then it was in English, and I'd sit down with her every week or so and go, because she didn't know English at all, hardly, and I'd go through this. This is what this means, and I was trying to explain to her a little bit about what a Unity minister needed to know before she ever went to Kansas City. Well, sad story. So we went through this for 3 or 4 months, and we applied for a visa to go to Beijing. So I took care of the application, I took care of everything, and her mother, who had been a church Christian for over 20 years in Chufu, Christian church, she had been the secretary every day. Every day she'd go to church. Every day she was the secretary. This was in Chufu. Her husband, Ben, was that travel agent I was telling you about, who was my key contact and everything, and really a very dear friend. But when Sally was going to come to Unity, her mother decided she wanted to come too. What could you say? So they both went to Kansas City. They both went to Beijing. They both had their visa hearings. Sally was approved. Her mother was not.
I'm just laughing because her mom obviously wanted to go to make sure.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So her mother was not. So everybody in Chufu went nuts. Because the whole idea that they've been working on, this was after the Daily Word, this was after everything we've been doing for 6 or 8 years with Unity, going back and forth and one thing or another. Sally was coming. They would take care of all of her expenses when she got here. But her mother's visa was denied. So Sally didn't feel like she could come anymore. So she didn't come. And wow, you talk about how one person can make a difference in this world? I also, Sally later became a kindergarten teacher in Beijing. Wow. She could have been to Unity. It was all set. But she didn't.
But lineage-wise, she already has it. So she's going to go to this. So she's already got it.
She's got it. Yeah. She's got it. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things I tried to do as a teacher, when I was teaching all these hundreds of girls who were wanting to be English teachers, is that most of them were from villages, and I used to go to their villages all the time. It was amazing what they grew up in. And but they wanted out. These girls didn't want to end up in the middle of the field, buried where our ancestors were. That's where they were buried. When people would die, they'd bury people out in the field. And these girls didn't want that. They wanted to become English teachers. It was like almost I was the window, When I go to the villages, and they knew who the Daily Word was at that point, the village did. The Kongdan was coming to their village, was a big deal. But I was the teacher. I was their teacher. But these girls wanted another life. They wanted to see beyond who they thought they were to become something else. Now, the caveat to that was a real problem, is because there were so many of them. In China, the girls there's 500 millions of them, So what they did is they fixed it so only the top 10, you had to get a score above a 90% on the final exam, entrance exam, to graduate from college. If you didn't do that, you couldn't become a teacher. Some of the girls used to sit out a whole year from school to study English. to study how do I do this, because they knew the competition was so fierce. They put learning at a premium. We don't appreciate that here. There's so many of them there that learning is a premium. I mean, I had friends who, when their high school kids would graduate from high school, they didn't go to school in their town. They go to, if they could afford it, they go to a college 100 miles away, a better school, so they could get a better education, so they could be more than something else. It's amazing what they think of while there, but we don't think that at all. But these girls, I'll tell you, but what I would teach was not just English, but how to see beyond who you think you are. That was the essence of what English would do. Seeing beyond, and for them, coming from the countryside, you know, and a village, some of their villages were 400 or 500 years old. We think of history here of, see what of, no. I went to some of the villages that have been there for 500 years. You know, and they would still look like they were villages that were over 100 years old. And so where these girls came from. They didn't want to do that. They didn't want that life. But unity, that's why unity would work. Because unity didn't try to tell you, no, you can't believe that. You have to believe this. No. Unity would say, you are a child of God. The Taoism, the Buddhism, all that fit. You can do those things. But what unity does, it helps you become a better person. That you have to see beyond who you think you are. And that opens the door in so many ways. So that's what I did. So I want to close with just a couple thoughts here. Emerson said, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. Wow, that's a big thing, isn't it? It's what lies within us that's important. You know, that is the whole of it. That is transcendentalism. That is new thought. That is unity. That is the path home to spirit. May we embody it. May we live it. May we move with it effortlessly, lovingly, in the true meaning of Wu Wei. So, with that, I want to close. I want to see if anyone has any thoughts or comments or something else. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. I just want to introduce at this point Ken Wilber and his teachings, because he is considered a panda, which means he's a guru is someone that keeps individual people. A panda is someone that just teaches. And Ken has studied the world and all the different cultures. He spent at one time 3 years where he only saw 4 people during that time, because he was trying to figure out how the world works. He would see that Eastern philosophy, that Carl Jung's stuff would work, but Buddhism would work, and they were so opposed. And so he couldn't figure it out. And he finally had gotten to the point where he gave up. I don't know why this is doing this. He gave up trying to figure it out. And when we do that, the universe can download the answers. And so he's written like 23 books. And one of them is Everything About Everything. And he goes through why everything fits together in such a way that it is absolutely astounding to me. Mm-hmm. Because every religion and every culture has evolved
around their terrain and their environment,
Right.
but they're all headed the same way.
Right.
And he says that throughout all of history, there has always been this strain of knowledge that has come forth to help bring people to a higher place. And he puts it together in a really amazing way. And so that is something that it takes your teaching and it kind of incorporates some of the other stuff and makes it very meaningful. I don't know if you've ever read it.
Well, I don't think I have, but that's a great contribution. There's a similar path to basically the same direction.
Yeah. And
That's very good.
pulls a lot of it together.
It's like, I like to think of an affirmation. And I'm going to close with this. And it's the divine presence lives within me, as me, and through me. I am a whole. I am enough. I am one with the living source of all. And so it is. And that's namaste. That's it. So I hope you all have enjoyed the program today. I hope it's been enlightening. That kind of fits the transcendence mode a little bit. But we always end the program with announcements. So I need to make a few announcements here for Unity. And then maybe we'll get together in the back. We'll do a little closing for that. But anyway, everyone is invited this evening and every Sunday evening at 6 p.m. for meditation. Next Sunday, we will welcome Jerry Stefanik back to our platform for his talk, I Called God, God a Busy Signal. Jerry says every one of us has had an experience of praying to God and not getting an answer. But there was an answer, we just didn't hear it. Find out the billions of ways that God comes to us. Join us next Sunday morning at 9:15 for our New Thought adult education class, Back to School on a Lifetime of Learning with Karen Craigle. This is a wonderful opportunity to deepen your spiritual understanding, explore Unity principles, and engage in meaningful discussion in a welcoming and supportive environment. We are now accepting donations for our yard sale, which is on September 11 and 12. You can drop items off anytime the church is open. We are accepting pretty much everything except TVs and big, heavy furniture. However, if you have these items, we may be able to list them on Marketplace and sell them for the church. Come support our youth department at our car wash fundraiser on Saturday, August 29th from 11 to 2. Bring your car for a wash and help your youth, our youth, raise funds for upcoming activities. Our next Unity Through Music outdoor concert is August 29th at 7 p.m. We will welcome Jonathan King, Brenda, Brianna Swartz, and Frankie C. to our outdoor stage. Bring friends and lawn chairs and come enjoy this great local talent. Tickets are on sale now for the Daniel Namod concert at 7 p.m. on July 4th. Daniel's music inspires the audiences to celebrate love, peace, and unity, and divine presence within all people. Tickets are $20. Registration is now open for our Community Kids Adventure, Flower Power, on September 8th and 9th. All kids 5 through 12 are invited. Thank you. All right, so we're going to close with a little circle in the back.